We're at step 3 in the tutorial for developing Drupal websites with Gitpod, which assumes you've already created a Gitpod account and you've installed the optional Chrome browser extension. It also means that you have created a Pantheon Terminus machine token and you've added it to Gitpod as an environment variable. I have a demo branch set up on Bitbucket, which doesn't have any of the Gitpod or ddev configuration files in it. I'm going to create a new branch from demo, and then I will add all the configuration files necessary. So create the branch, creating it from demo. Let's call this demo 7. And there we go. So then on to step 3A, which is to create the file .gitpod YAML. Go to the view source, noting that we're still in the demo 7 context. Okay, add the file. And I'm going to grab this snippet from the tutorial. And here we only need to change one thing. It's the path, it's the name of your theme and the path if it doesn't match the path here. Our theme name is Jumpstart. And that's all we have to do. We can commit this right now. But before we do, let me explain a couple of things. So here's the image. We're pulling a specific Docker file. That Docker file has yet to be created. We'll be creating it a little later in this screencast. The tasks, this is really interesting. But because building the application, which is doing a composer install, pull on the database, that can take a little while. And also building the theme. We're having to do an npm install, and we're also having to build out Storybook assets. That could also take a little while. We're able to run these both, build application and build theme, in parallel. They aren't dependent on each other. However, this last task, open browser, is dependent on both build application and build theme. And it's told right here explicitly to wait for those two to finish. Once they are both finished, we will finish up with starting ddev, clearing cache, launching a preview window, and giving us the one-time user login link. Below there is the VS Code extensions. These are extensions we use at Capellic. And then ports. Some of these ports, I have no idea what they do. I just know that they're needed. Some are optional, such as, mailhog. Mailhog starts here. PHP myadmin, and so forth. The one that I will draw your attention to is port 8080. That's the port through which we will view the website when we're doing our development. And noting that the visibility is public. What this means is this URL, you can share it with anybody in the world, and when they visit it, they will see your workspace only when the workspace is active. So if you turn off your workspace, they will not be able to access it. But this is pretty handy. If I'm working on something and I need a colleague to check something out, I can grab the URL, throw it in a Slack message. So this is another advantage over local dev. Sure, you can do this with local dev, but it takes additional configuration. So this all looks good. Let's get it committed. All right, now we're moving on to step 3B, which is to create the .gitpod/.gitpod.docker file. This is the Docker file we just referenced. Let's go to view source. Add the file. Let me just make a note here that you're noticing that I'm using the web interface for the Bitbucket to add all these files. Yes, that is true. I don't have to have this repo cloned to my local to do this configuration, and neither do you. You may prefer to do it that way. That's great. But for me, it's just as easy to get into the web browser and edit files and create files within Bitbucket. I'm going to grab the code from the snippet. And you'll notice here that we have a node version installed. The only reason really why we're defining our own Docker file, which is an extension of this ddev Gitpod base image, is that we want to be able to control the version of Node. This is because we manage websites over time, and we're not constantly updating the version of Node. So we're able to define a Node version for each project. So this looks good. Committing that. And now we're on to step 3C, where we're going to create the file .gitpod/nvm-lazy.sh. And we're going to take this snippet from the tutorial. There's absolutely nothing to change here. What this is going to do is be sure that this is a product of being sure that we're using the right version of Node. I'm going to commit this. Great. This concludes our configuration of Gitpod. Now we're going to move down to step 4 to configure ddev. Now I should mention that ddev has a config and start command that will generate configuration files that you'll then need to commit to your repo. But we're not going to use that workflow in this tutorial. Why? We need a function container for running ddev to do that. We used to simply launch Gitpod to get the needed container for configuring ddev. But what we found that this gums up Gitpod's image and task caching system. When restarting a workspace or even creating a new workspace from the same branch, we've seen all sorts of strange errors. So we just want to avoid that completely. And we don't want Gitpod to have the wrong idea about what we're trying to do. The good news, though, is that there's not a lot more to do to configure ddev. There's only 3 files that we need to deal with. So let's get started. So step 4A is to create the .ddev/config.yaml file. Let's get back to the view source page. Add the file. .ddev directory doesn't exist yet. It will now after we commit this. And let's grab the snippet from the tutorial. Okay, there's a number of things that we're going to want to pay attention to here. The first one being the name. This needs to be the Pantheon application name to match the machine name on Pantheon. So ours is Capella-Jumpstart. And then type. If you're not using Drupal 10, you'll need to update that to the version you're using, 9, hopefully not 8, and certainly hopefully not 7. Doc root. Pretty standard these days for Pantheon apps that they're put into the web doc root, but you might have something custom, or you may have an older application where it needs to be somewhere else. And then Node.js_version. This should match the version that you have put into the Docker file. This is all looking good. Let's get it committed. All right, next we're going to do step 4B, which is to create the .ddev/providers/pantheon.yaml file. This is going to allow us to pull the database from Pantheon. And the providers directory, of course, doesn't exist yet, but it will after we make this commit. I'm going to first grab the snippet, get it in here, and then we'll talk about it. So while ddev does support the ability to pull files from Pantheon, push files to Pantheon, push the database up to Pantheon, we only authenticate with Pantheon to pull the database. That's all we want to do in the way that we work. Therefore, we have limited our Pantheon providers file to this activity. We use stage file proxy to pull the content files we need for our Gitpod workspace. It's a lot more efficient that way. So you'll want to update the project variable in the snippet to match your application's machine name as it is on Pantheon. So ours again is Capella Jumpstart. And note that I'm pulling from the live environment. You may want to adjust this based on your convention, but note that this provider script isn't pulling from the live database. It's pulling the most recent backup of the live database. So I wouldn't be concerned about performance is really what it comes down to. And per what I spoke about earlier, we only have the authentication command and the database pull command. Nothing about pushing and so forth. But we'll never have to interface with these things. The build script will take care of all of this. Let's commit it. Okay, now we're on to step 4C, which is update file web/site/default/settings.php. Navigate to that. I'm going to edit this file right in the browser. I am going to scroll to the bottom of the file, create a space for it. I'm going to paste in that code. Okay, I'm ready to commit that. And that's all the configuration that we have to do. We're done. So now, step 5, launch Gitpod. So I don't see the Gitpod button here. So let me go back to the view source. Aha! So this is the Chrome browser extension that I spoke about earlier. All I have to do is click on this, noting I am in the demo 7 branch context. So it will create a new workspace with a branch for demo 7. And I have my Gitpod set up to automatically create the workspace. I imagine yours, if it's a new account, you may still have to manually hit the continue button there. That's fine. I know I always want VS Code. I always want the standard size resources, but those are things that you can look into. Now we're building the image. This is going to take a little while. I'm going to let the screencast roll. I'm not going to hit pause or anything like that. So I really want you to see what it takes to run this for the first time. Now, I say first time because when you relaunch this workspace for this branch, and I think even if you launch a new workspace for an existing branch or even a new branch in an existing project, so there's uncertainty here, but Gitpod is really trying to cache as many of the build steps as possible. So the Docker image, even the tasks within Gitpod configs gitpod.yaml, those build tasks, so build application and build theme, it's going to try to cache those. So in the best case scenario, when we launch a workspace, all that's happening is that last build step. All that's happening is the open browser step where we're doing ddev start, a cache clear, and then launching a preview window and then generating the one-time login link. That makes launching ephemeral workspaces within the cloud very fast. You can see if you're watching the logs closely, we're seeing things like nvm lazy being executed. These are things that we added just moments ago. Okay, the image is done. Now we're building the workspace and pulling that image that we just created. Okay, so here we are with VS Code. Explorer on the left, and in the middle, or on the right, I should say, we've got one empty pane at the top, which we'll start filling in with welcome screens from VS Code extensions that we use. So we'll ignore that pane for now and instead focus our attention in the terminal area. What I really want to talk about is this right side where we've landed on the open browser terminal, but there are two others. And these two others you might have figured out already map to the tasks within the .gitpod YAML file. So build application, if we go here, we can see some Docker stuff getting pulled. We're seeing the image, the database image being pulled. My PHP admin, all that's loading in. These things should look familiar based upon the configuration that we just completed. Eventually, it's going to do a composer install and then pull the most recent database backup from our live environment on Pantheon. Meanwhile, over here on the build theme, we're doing npm install. And now we are building Storybook. And the command that it's on will be here in this little summary. Let's go back to the build application. There we are. Composer install has been executed. And we're downloading all of those, extracting them, installing those modules. So we could come back here and just sit here patiently, but it's kind of exciting the first time to watch everything happen. And it's happening in parallel. So we're definitely saving minutes. Here we are. We've logged into Pantheon with our machine token. And we are now going to pull the database. And it's importing it. So let's go back to the open browser step. And we're going to wait here for the, build application is done. Now we're just, build theme is done. Okay, now we just have these final steps to start vdev and open the browser. Sometimes there's some errors here where service isn't healthy and we'll just keep on retrying. Don't worry, be patient. And the simple browser is loaded. We have the one-time login link here, the cache rebuild message. Let's close these notification windows. And here we have the website loaded into our simple browser. And of course, the images are missing because we are not pulling the images from Pantheon. I would then go into enable stage file proxy for this environment. Or, if we want to get fancy, we can get our config split going here as well. So this is it. And for a bonus, I do want to show you how much faster it will be when we relaunch this workspace. Now, stopping it for the first time will take a little while. I don't know all that's what's going on here, but I've been told that it's doing various savings and cache priming and this, that, and the other. So it's busy. I trust that the Gitpod folks want to make this faster, and they will over time. But for now, we're just going to be patient. Now, if you're just shutting down a workspace like I just did, you don't need to wait around. You can just get going. But since we want to relaunch this specific workspace, we are going to stick around. Because the idea being here is that we shouldn't have to wait for an image to build, and we shouldn't have to wait for the build application and build theme tasks to happen. Okay, let's open the workspace. Okay, so we're starting the workspace. We are going to participate in some image building here. Not clear to me why. Again, mysteries of Gitpod caching. So if there are any Gitpod experts out there who might be able to offer an explanation, please put it in the comments. Okay, well, that didn't take long. So clearly we didn't have to build the image from scratch. And we're starting our workspace. I'm going to keep an eye on the terminal just as VS Code is being created, because if I am correct and build application and build theme have both been cached, then we should see open browser kick off almost immediately. Yep, there it goes. Build application done, build theme done. DDev is starting. Like I talked about earlier, we are seeing some health issues here. But hey, that was fast. Okay, let's try this one more time. Let's stop the workspace again. Again, though, this is something I usually don't stick around for. I will just simply stop the workspace and carry on. By the way, if you just walk away without stopping your workspace, you can set different timeouts so that you're not running the meter. We have our timeout set for 15 minutes. So let's open the workspace one more time. I'm curious to see if we are going to get any image building activities. I'm seeing that we're pulling the container image. Doesn't feel like we are going to see any image building activities. We made it. Here's VS Code. Let's watch the terminal. And again, right into the open browser task. Again, something's not healthy yet. Oh, this is a bit of a different error. Recreating, trying. We're getting errors up in the simple browser because the services just aren't ready. Struggling a little bit. There we go. Okay. What we didn't, though, is the process didn't successfully finish. So we're not getting the drush ULI. So let's go to ddev drush ULI. Okay, that looks healthy. And we're going to put that in the simple browser. And now we're logged in. And there we go. That concludes the screencast for this tutorial. Good luck and enjoy.